Well, Patrick, we talked last year at the Dallas Film Festival, which it's hard to believe it's been a year ago
Yeah, yeah.
already. And you mentioned then how amazing it is that all these years later, just the impact of people that still talk about this show. Just talk a little bit about what that means to both of you to be a part of something that has become such a cultural icon for what we do for entertainment.
I actually have had to reassess my opinion about the show, about the characters, about my craft. I even sort of cringe when I think of what I do as a living as a craft. But I actually have to come to grips with that the show has such a far-reaching influence. That's not just fan-based, it's somehow personality-based and humanity-based. And Linda was talking about this earlier today, is that people on our show over the years have identified on a much deeper level than just a surface, oh, I like that character, or am I like Sue Ellen, or am I like Pamela, or, you know, am I the good guy or the bad guy? There's an undercurrent that persisted on that show that I have to admit now has an influence on people. And I think by and large a very good influence on people. And it's important for me now to acknowledge that, to honor it in the sense of not, you know, I've always my wife was the first one to always slap me down on this, is to belittle the sort of thing that I do for a living, because it sort of feels normal and natural. And she says, no, it's actually really good. You know, what you all do is really good and it serves a purpose. And that's kind of where I'm at now. The fact that there can even be conceived a retrospective of Dallas. I mean, is there anything on the planet that hasn't been investigated about this show? So why is there an attraction for it? It's because it goes deeper than just information. It satisfies something in people's psyche. And as long as we're a part of that and I can participate and maybe add to it, then that's a great thing to do. And I feel like my job is better as a human being if I acknowledge that and participate. So that's it.
Do you sort of feel the same way?
Well, I feel that it is a craft. And I'll tell the story about my dear friend Sue Ellen Ewing, who started off really doing nothing. She was pouring coffee for JR, and she didn't have a name in the beginning, and for the first 2 years I was at the back of the show, never in front, with all the big guys. So I knew right then that my job as an actor is to do the research. Who was I? What was I doing in Texas? I was married to this man, this billionaire oil tycoon, but who was I? So the research began, and that's what I just turn up all the volume and find out what it was. Who was she? What was it like to live in Dallas, Texas during that time? What was happening in Texas? And I researched the women in Texas and that had made huge strides, and loved the women. Loved that we had two female governors in Texas. And so I was absolutely mesmerized because, first of all, I had a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of dialogue, but I had a lot of time. So I did the research, and I went out, what do they wear? What do they talk about? Who are their husbands? What are their shoes like? And I remember a great story in the mansion. We were invited to some event, and I was in the mansion, ladies' room, and a woman next to me putting on lipstick had a little Judith Lieber bag about that big. And I think this water bottle is bigger than the bag. And it was about this big, and she opened it, we were both putting on lipstick, and I looked down, and there was a gun in her bag.
Wow.
And I looked at the bag, and there was a gun and a lipstick. And I couldn't help myself, being a California girl, almost a Texan. I said, excuse me, but is that a gun? And she just looked at me very calmly, and she said, of course, this is Texas. And I thought, yes, this is fabulous. More went into the research. I loved it. I ran home and told Leonard Katzen, our producer, I said, put this scene in the show. This is priceless. He never did, but I still love my story. But it was just, and I think those characters did, like Patrick said beautifully, they made an impact that was far greater than entertainment. It touched people's hearts and psyches. And if they didn't have a JR in their life in some way, shape, or form, that they could relate in some way to the Bobby character, beautifully played by my sweetheart. And Victoria and that relationship, and the J.R. Sue Ellen relationship. They could relate on many, many deep levels. And they had, Miss Hadley had a mastectomy. Sue Ellen was an alcoholic. All of these things were bigger than life, but they tapped into the humanity in everybody. And I think that's what made it huge.